Good morning, everyone. This is Jane Scott with Metametrics, and I will be taking you through your journey today to learn about the Quantile framework for mathematics. And in the chat room with me is fellow colleague Matt Copeland. He will be there to answer any questions that may come along as we go through the information today. And if you are joining me for a second day, because Wednesday we did the Lexile framework for reading session, if you're joining me again today, thank you so much for coming on back and listening to this old Southern voice of mine. But hopefully you can get past that and can settle in and enjoy our session today. One thing we'd like to share before I'm going to turn it over to someone that's there, that's on the session with us from the Department of Education in Indiana. And one of the things that we just want to kind of give you a heads up on, we will ask that you remain muted as Matt is in the chat room answering questions. And if you do feel the need to type Matt a question, he's going to be sharing things with you back there in the chat room, if you will. If you do ask questions, we would like to request that you give us your email address in case, as things occur as we're going through our session, if he wants to get back to you with a more detailed answer to the question you pose, he will have a way to connect with you. So we would certainly appreciate that. So the session that we are having today, and there's actually an entire flyer of sessions that the Department of Education, specifically the Office of Assessments there in Indiana, came together with Metametrics to bring this series to you. Now in the chat room is Kelly Conley. She is the Senior Assessment Specialist and works in the office of the Director of Assessment, Dr. Charity Flores. So Kelly, if you're on the line, if you want to give us a few more housekeeping pieces of information, and then we will get started. So Kelly, jump on in.
Good morning, Jane. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for that warm welcome. I just want to also welcome everyone this morning. We're really glad that you're able to attend. We hope that you can stay for the whole time. This is an opportunity for Metametrics and the department and everyone in Indiana who's on this call to kind of level set on quantiles and those resources that are available in that Metametrics has available for us with regard to quantiles. So glad that you're able to join us. I want to address the most popular question of all of these sessions, or any session for that matter, is where do I get the recording and where do I get the PowerPoint? We are going to make those available to you just as soon as we can. Jane and Matt are recording this session now, and so they will make that recording available to the department shortly in the days after this presentation. Once it's ready for us, they'll hand that off, and I will post for all corporation test coordinators through the CTC listserv that goes out on Monday from our office. I will share all of those materials with CTCs as they become available. They are going to trickle out to the schools because the sessions are not all held all at once. But we will post those for CTCs in the CTC listserv as they become available. And then once all sessions conclude toward the end of August, we'll make sure that all of these are up on our website as well, so anybody can go and access them. Right now, Jane's gonna take the lead here in a moment, and there's a slide coming up that references that our website, the IDOE website, is under construction. And we're every year, the Office of Student Assessment refreshes our website, our web pages, just to make sure everything is up to date and current. And right now that refresh is in progress. So once that refresh has taken place and these resources are available, then we'll post them to the website. So there is a little bit of a delay. We're sorry to say, but we're in the queue and it's going to happen. And so That's the story on the recording and the PowerPoint. They will be available. They're just not available at this moment, and we will make them available as soon as possible. The other thing that I want to make known to you is at the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask Matt, just like he did last time, to request that all folks who are on the call at the end of the session to go ahead and type their email addresses in. That'll be our cue to say, oh, you know, these folks stayed for the entire session. We're going to put them on our list of folks who are going to get PGPs. So just something else to think about if you're able to stay the whole session. PGPs will be available. We're going to issue those at the end of the series as well. That way we don't have all sorts of certificates coming and going at rapid fire. So we'll just wait to do all the PGPs at once, and we'll work within our office to issue those later. I think that's all I've got, Jane. I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so very much, Kelly, for helping us to organize this and bring it to the educators. Excuse me. There, I think I've cleared my throat. Thank you so much for helping us organize this and publicizing it out to the educators in in Indiana. Too many sessions and too many days. One of the things that I would like to share before we even get started in talking about the Quantile framework for mathematics, and that is the hub that you will hear me mention time and time again today, and those resources that are available in the hub. We have scheduled these so that Wednesday we did Lexiles, today we're doing the Quantile framework for mathematics, and next Thursday at 9 a.m. we will come together again and do a walkthrough of the resources and tools in the hub. So some of you may start panicking when I start showing you some of these great resources that exist within the hub through these screenshots that I will be sharing. Please know you have access to these because of the partnership between Indiana and Metametrics, and all of these tools will be available to you free. We encourage you, if you are going to join us next Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, we encourage you to go ahead and go to the hub. I'm certain my colleague Matt will be back there shooting you a link to the hub. We ask you don't go there right now, but yet you go ahead, get registered for the account. Matt will share some information about that as well. But I want to alleviate everyone's fears, because usually when we're in the Quantile session, folks are so excited to see what is actually in the hub, and that you will have access to free of charge with your premium membership provided to you due to the partnership between Metametrics and Indiana. So I wanted to take that fear away right up front so that you can sit back and relax and know that you have access to everything that you are about to see. So let's begin our session this morning talking about where you are receiving the measures, the Lexile framework for reading, measure of student ability, and the Quantile framework for mathematics, measure of student readiness. Well, both of our metrics are linked to state assessments, as we're linked there in Indiana. We're also linked to norm referenced as well as formative assessments. And products around the nation also report Lexile and Quantile measures via reading and math programs that have been developed by those that are expert in creating these type programs, if you will. Currently, around the nation, over 45 million students are receiving Lexile and Quantile measures in all 50 states. Either their state has linked, as you have done there in Indiana, to our metrics, or they are using one of those reading or math products that report a benchmark measure throughout the school year. In this upcoming school year, 2021, students in grades 3 through 8 will receive a Lexile and a Quantile measure on your iLearn assessment, and everyone is hoping and wishing and praying about our children to get back into those classrooms when the time is correct, and we can go ahead and give them as normal of a school year as we can in 2021. On the website, as Kelly shared, you do have information that you can send parents to. We are working with the department to update this information that parents can access, or even you want to send your colleagues to learn more about the Lexile and Quantile framework. And that's Kelly's email address. She gave us permission to put it on this slide. She shares that if you start digging around and you're looking for the information once everything is uploaded, updated on the Indiana Department of Ed website, she would be happy for you to contact her, and she can direct you where to find these things. On your website, currently you can find an overview of the iLearn score report that would go home to parents, or parents would have access to. On that report, there would be the Lexile measure, and you can see that here. We did not add to this PowerPoint where it shows the quantile measure, but it's going to be located very similarly wherever the math side of the iLearn score report is. So this measure is going home, being reported home to parents as well. If you were with me on Wednesday, you saw that these are some of our partners, not nearly all of our partners, that have created programs with Lexiles at the core of those, meaning that if you have any of these products that you see on the screen, and there's also a link where you can go and investigate some that aren't even identified here, excuse me. Matt has that link and can share that with you. But if you have a product that shows on our website that it has been linked to the Lexile framework, that simply means you have an opportunity to gauge that child's reading growth throughout the year using that Lexile student measure. And on the other side of the coin, the very same thing can be said about the Quantile framework. We have those partnerships that have been developed over the years in the industry, and these are some, not all, of the products that currently have that Quantile scale at the core. And we literally are adding new Quantile products weekly, it seems. So that is a growing list, and one day you may have be looking for a benchmark assessment that you don't find, and then the next day it's there. So if you question either a Lexile product that reports the Lexile framework on students, or a Quantile product, if you have a question and you can't find it, you have Matt's email, you have my email, please reach out. Don't make that a stumbling block for you. We can do that research and double check where those measures would be reported and how you would see those. So we will be happy to do that. So let's get started. The Quantile framework for mathematics is basically like a yardstick. It is truly the way to measure a child's mathematical knowledge on the very same scale with math skills and concepts. And the math skills and concepts in our database, we call those Quantile QSCs. So the measuring of the math skills and concepts, we have these on our website that we call QSCs, and we can tell you the difficulty of these skills and concepts. And then if you have that student's mathematical measure stated from the Quantile scale, that is telling you that child's readiness, so you can see when students are ready to entertain various skills and concepts that the curriculum there in Indiana requires that you teach. You know right where they are ready to have that introductory lesson. So going a little deeper into the scale, the scale to the right looks as if it goes down to EM 300. We actually go all the way down to EM 400. And we have sitting right here next to it this thermometer, if you will. And as you can see, just like on a thermometer, the further you get away from that zero, the colder things are. The very same thing is true on the quantile scale. The lower those students fall below 0 quantile, and that is what we call an emerging mathematician, or EM. The lower you go, the less mathematical knowledge that student may possess. And we're often asked, how in the world can you measure math all the way down at an emerging mathematician 400 quantile? Well, when you give a child, for example, a sheet of apples, and you ask them to color one of those apples red, that's that child having some numeration things happening in their minds, and they are selecting that single one apple, that one-to-one correspondence there again, if you will. So our scale goes all the way down to EM 400Q. Now you'll notice that last bullet there shares that just like on a thermometer, when you drop below 0, we register that as a negative sign, or a minus sign, if you will. We would not want to talk in terms of a parent's child. You're at a negative 100 on the quantile scale from this most recent assessment that your child took. So that EM there is a way to inform the educator to know where that child is falling on the quantile scale in terms of their abilities. And then that EM is yet a softer way to talk with parents about where they are on the quantile scale, and that as we get those students above that 0Q, they are growing as a mathematician. And of course, that EM zone, if you will, in our scale, it's opposite from above 0. Again, just like a thermometer, the higher that number is below 0 on the quantile scale, the less mathematical schema that little student may possess, just like on that thermometer. And then the higher that number gets on top of that 0, the better mathematician they are becoming. So growth, yes, is another piece of information you can glean from the quantile measure being on a student along that same scale with their skills and concepts. So for those of you that joined us on Wednesday of this week, let's take a minute to think about how Lexile and quantile scales are similar. First of all, both are developmental scales. The higher that number above 0 that child is, the better reader and or mathematician that child is. The higher that number is on the Lexile scale, the more difficult that text is. The higher the number is on the quantile scale, the more complex that math concept is. So that is a similarity that you can think about when you're looking at both of our metrics. Both of these scales, as you've seen, measure both the student's ability, but on the same scale with, on the Lexile side, the text they encounter, on the math side, those skills and concepts they encounter. And both enable an educator to personalize instruction so that students can have text and or math instruction put in front of them where they are in order to get them where they need to be. And you also have this opportunity to track growth. So both scales do allow you to track growth. So drilling a little deeper in the quantile metric, we're going to take a look at two types of quantile measures. And I'm certain if you're with me Wednesday, you know where we're going here. And if you've been looking at the graphics up to this point, you know where we're going here as well. So there are two kinds of quantile measures. First, the student quantile measure. And you're going to hear me say, probably more than you want to recall this morning, that student quantile measure is their measure of readiness to interact with various skills and concepts. We are telling you right where they're ready to learn so that we don't go too far, too fast, and leave gaps in their understanding. That student quantile measure tells you and can be an indication of the level of success that child will have in the skills and concepts that will be covered in the days and weeks and months ahead. And again, that student's quantile measure of readiness also is an excellent indicator of how well that child is growing. On the other side, or the other type of quantile measure that we will spend a lot of time talking about today, are the quantile measures for QSCs. Now remember, I've already introduced that term this morning. QSCs are quantiles, skills, and concepts. These are the skills and concepts that, as we were developing the quantile framework for mathematics, we identified skills and concepts that, as we examined various math curriculums around the nation, as we looked at math curriculums of entities that focused on math instruction, if you will, we identified the skills and concepts that would naturally, most often we found were in the grade levels from K-12. And we identified those and began to develop the scale known as the Quantile Framework for Mathematics. Now, once we identified those skills and concepts that you would find at kindergarten, and the skills and concepts you would find at 8th grade, if you will, we then began to take our quantile skills and concepts on the road and worked with educators within classrooms, got insight from teachers, if you will, to begin to determine the difficulty of the skills and concepts that we had identified. And it was through these practices that our psychometricians at Metametrics, because Metametrics is a research company, if you will, we began to develop the scale that became to be known as the Quantile Framework for Mathematics. So our QSCs that you will find in the hub, in the Math Skills database, one of the tools that you will have access to, and we will go through next Thursday. Our QSCs have been assigned a measure of difficulty. Then, as the quantile scale had been developed, we had our QSCs assigned a measure of difficulty. We then began to look at the math curriculums around the nation. And in the hub, under Quantile Tools, within the Math Skills database, you will find your Indiana Academic Mathematics Standards for Mathematics, I believe is the appropriate verbiage. They're there. And we have actually aligned our QSCs, and remember what our QSCs have over here, that measure of difficulty. We've aligned our QSCs to your Indiana Academic Standards for Mathematics. We have aligned our QSCs to your standards. So now that transfer of our difficulty level on our skills and concepts can now naturally be assumed that these various Indiana Academic Standards for Mathematics have that coordinating difficulty level. Now, we did some other things with our QSCs, but I'm going to dangle that carrot for a few slides down the road, if you will. So this is what it might look like. Here we have an example of a young lady that could have just taken the iLearn and has a quantile measure, or this lady took one of our benchmark assessments from one of the partners that we examined just a minute ago, and it was determined that she has a quantile measure of readiness at an 840Q. Her teacher, whatever classroom, whatever grade level, went to the Quantile website, looked up his or her math standards, and discovered that this lesson that is going to be taught in the days ahead also has a quantile measure of an 840Q, because that QSC in Indiana was aligned to, that standard in Indiana was aligned to our QSC that had this very same measure as well. So again, putting that student measure of math readiness on the very same scale with the complexity of the math that they are going to face. And that's exactly what is made up of the Quantile framework in this single screenshot. So we want to take it a little bit deeper in the explanation about the QSCs, because we know that's a foreign concept to think about when we think of math. But as we go forward, looking at a specific QSC in our database, it's this one. Use models to investigate the concept of the Pythagorean theorem. In our list of skills and concepts, that particular concept comes in or is identified as a QSC 271. Now, when our quantile specialist examined the Indiana Academic Standards for Mathematics, I like it when it's right there in front of me to read. When our quantile specialist examined your standards, we found that QSC 271 would align most perfectly, if you will, to the Indiana standard in grade 8, GM.7, if you will. So because of the alignment, remember we tested around the nation and we determined that QSC 271 has a quantile measure of difficulty falling somewhere around a 10-10 quantile on our scale up here in the upper stratosphere, if you will. So because QSC 271 has a measure of 10-10 quantile, and QSC 271 was aligned to this Indiana math standard, we can therefore make that transfer over that in grade 8, that Indiana math standard GM.7 also has a difficulty of a 10-10 quantile. Now this note here under our quantile map, if you will, is simply for me to remember to point out, and this information is not something that I really ever thought to point out, but it was always coming up in professional development that I would do, is that this QSC identifying number here does not have any bearing on the difficulty measure, if you will. 271 has nothing to do with the difficulty of this. This is just our identifying number and how you will see which QSCs are linked to your own identifying numbers within your math standards. So when we look next Thursday in the hub, and if you've been to the hub, yay! Matt does love to share that folks are more than welcome to play in our sandbox at any time. The more the merrier, and the more often you're there, the more excited we personally are, if you will. So to take this a step further, to look at the insights you will see when you align your math standards to our quantile framework, we're going to look at yet another single Indiana math standard, and in this instance, it's Indiana Standard for Mathematics 4.N.3. Look at this standard. It involves so many things that fourth grade educator in Indiana needs to make certain he or she covers. Well, that's another wonderful feature about the research that we did within the development of the quantile framework for mathematics. Here's this single standard. When you go to the hub and you go to the Math Skills database and you do the drop down and select your state, drop down and you select grade 4 because that's the grade level that you teach. When you sort the Indiana standards, and all of those columns at the top are sortable, you will find 1, 2, 3, 4 4-point M3s. Jane, we only have one 4-point M3 in the state of Indiana, and here it is. Yes, we are aware of that, but there are so many things when you begin to unpack the standard in our examination of this particular Indiana standard. We found 1, 2, 3, 4 QSCs that we could align to that single Indiana standard. In fact, when you get on the website, I think you'll find even a 5th QSC aligned to this standard, but the screenshot's not big enough, so we apologize for that. But now take a look just at, here's your single standard that you may be teaching in the days ahead. Here are the 4 different QSCs that we've aligned to that single standard. Now this is our description. You're never far away from your Indiana descriptions for your standards, either on the website, and I can share that with you on Thursday. But here are the descriptions for our QSCs that made us align it to this individual standard. Look to the right. Now think about this single Indiana standard and the difficulty of, the levels of difficulty, if you will, of instruction that needs to occur. That our QSCs indicate that when that 4th grade teacher is teaching this standard, that yes, we want to teach them estimate, measure, and compare length. That's at a difficulty level of a 240 in the Quantile scale, on the Quantile scale. But one can't stop there, because that's why unpacking those standards are so very difficult, and we give you insight with that guide on the side to help you think about something. Because in that 4th grade classroom, not only do you need to be teaching at this level, but that standard takes you all the way up to an 820 quantile level of complexity in this single standard, where they're converting measures of length. And you can read it. That's our QSC description. So thinking about looking at your Indiana standards that have been aligned to our QSCs and realizing that we're going to help an educator with instruction along the way to make certain that they are taking the students to the complexity level that the standards indicate that instruction needs to journey to, if you will. And I think that's a really good screenshot to drive this home. So if you're in the sandbox of the hub and you're playing with some of our tools, by all means, get in there and align all of your grade level standards to the Quantile framework. And at that point, with making that statement, I would like to share, I, being an educator here in the state of North Carolina, that's where I am, and Matt, by the way, is in Kansas, and you guys are in Indiana. We do have the nation pretty well covered. Spending 31 years in education and about 21 of those in the classroom, whenever I do professional development, I know I oftentimes have educators listening. I have administrators listening. I have instructional coaches listening. So I apologize if you're bringing the eyes of that administrator, but please just focus some of the things that I will share as things that you should see happening as you're in and out of classrooms, or as you're discussing with teachers that are work within your building or within your district. And if you're an instructional coach, just think that this is how I can go and share that with the teachers that are actually teaching math in whatever grade level that you're responsible for. And if you are a teacher that happens to be with us today, that's where my heart is. That's us educators. So I apologize if I'm not framing this exactly right to fit the particular lens that you're bringing to that topic matter. So please forgive me on that account. So as we're going on about the quantile scale, and we're thinking about, we've already discussed the developmental nature of the scale. The higher the quantile, the more difficult the math, the higher that student quantile measure, the better mathematician a teacher would have in front of them. There's another characteristic of the scale, and that is when it was developed, the quantile framework, I say we, globally, if you will, when the scale was being developed, it was quickly realized that the scale would not be about mastery. So many things need to occur there within the classroom to determine mastery. And we felt that as we were investigating the scale and the QSCs, if you will, that by looking at where a child was ready to engage in that next skill or concept would be best. So therefore, before you move a child down the road, if you will, to that next skill or concept, you want to make certain that they have the knowledge base they need across all of the content strands before moving forward. So the quantile scale is unidimensional. A student receiving a measure on a benchmark assessment will have a single quantile measure. Some of our partner products may break that down, but that student single measure is going to be their schema across all the content strands. So you'll just get that single quantile measure. The same thing on iLearn as you are looking at students from the ages, because iLearn has reported quantiles for several years. So you get that single quantile measure. And to explain or to help you internalize what that unidimensional aspect would mean, let's take a look at this measurement item. Very simply, what is the measure of angle A? And all you mathematicians out there are just quickly doing that math in your mind. But for a student to successfully solve this particular problem, that student is going to have some background knowledge across 4 strands. Because, of course, to recognize that it's a triangle comes from the geometry strand, and then the sum of the interior angles, geometry again. Knowing the measurement of the right angle, that came from the measurement strand. But then, and geometry is a toughie because it's so tactile in its beginnings, if you will. But once the abstract rears its head and students have got to take what they know and then write that equation, the algebra is going to come in. And then to do the calculations within that equation, numerical operations come in. And if along the way, somewhere students are lacking in their background knowledge in one of these strands, they're going to stumble and they will not arrive at that solution. And obviously that's why as educators, we're watching them every step of the way to see where the stumble occurs. But within the quantile framework, we are looking at readiness. And so putting that quantile measure on the very same scale as their skills and concepts, our research looked at it from the standpoint of those students being right ready to interact with all of these strands. And I always share this story when I get to the unidimensionality explanation, because primarily I was a 5th grade teacher when I was in the classroom before I moved into an administrative setting, and I did loop up with my students one year and went to that middle school zone. Kind of scared me. I came on back to 5th grade. But anyway, within the state of North Carolina, I had the opportunity to train and go out for the state of North Carolina and train other educators on a statewide unit for geometry. It's called Polyhedraville. You may have heard of it years ago, obviously. But Polyhedraville started with very tactile kinds of things. Children would cut the nets out and put them together to make the various shapes and the like, and then count the sides and the vertices and so forth, and then take these shapes they have made and create their own little street, and then all the streets would come together through measuring of the streets and so forth. They come together and we have the town known as Polyhedraville. But once that moved away, and I was just glowing, having come back from that training and used it in my classroom, I was just glowing to my parents during conferences at the strength of their geometry knowledge. And then the abstract came in. We started having to set up equations to solve various questions that needed to be posed so that I was meeting the needs of my particular North Carolina standards at the time. And my children began just falling by the wayside. It was so very sad. And I realized then that, yes, that tactile side of geometry, they had a handle on it. But once we moved into the abstract and those other strands started rearing their head within geometry, that is where they began to stumble. So that single quantile measure gives you the comfort zone of knowing those students when you put a skill and concept in their hand and begin that introductory lesson. Those students have, for the most part, what they need across all of those content strands. So again, the Quantile framework for mathematics is putting the difficulty of the skill, that child's ability, on the very same scale, the Quantile framework. Now, within the content strands, if you will, in mathematics, it's developmental. You obviously would know asking a student to find the length of their pencil is going to be far easier than getting them to find the circumference of a circle. So that developmental nature certainly does occur across these individual strands. And there's something else to think about, that across these strands, that developmental nature, when you're thinking about that low level, you skip counting to model multiplication, that particular numerical operation could rear its head when that child is dealing with interpreting a graph, creating a graph, if you will. It reared its head when we would do science projects. And I would ask students to create a graph. I would show them expectations and then would turn them loose, and I would have students that would not have those even intervals on the X and Y axis of the graph that they were creating. So knowing that they've got that schema across all content strands is something that has been built into the Quantile framework for mathematics. So I think this next question, I hope, has been rolling around. Why do you need to know about the Quantile framework? What are the benefits, Jane? How's this going to help me, or how would this help the educators that I work with? Let's explore a little deeper here. Let's look at the student expectations in your Indiana academic standards for mathematics that have been aligned, as we shared, and these are found in the hub again, to the Quantile framework for mathematics. Basically, down and dirty, how does an educator determine the difficulty of the math standards that they are expected to teach? Well, here we are, that tool that I keep mentioning to you, and I'm going to point some things out today because some of you may not can join us next Thursday. Now, the recording will be there when we do the walkabout in the hub, so don't forget to be grabbing that from Kelly and the folks in her office. Sorry, a sip of coffee to help this throat of mine. So I'll point some things out in case you're just going to dive on into the hub when we finish today, so that you'll be kind of ready to know what you're looking at and how to manipulate those tools. In the Quantile Math Skills Database, you would just do, as I've already shared, select your state, pick your poison over here, grade 6, and you've got K through Algebra 1, Math 1, Geometry. So pick your poison over here. And then we recommend, before you start, this drop-down field is where your standards are going to be all the time. The exact verbiage of your standards will be sitting right here all the time until you mosey on deeper into the math skills database. We highly recommend, so that you can see how we help you unpack your standards, that you select the state, your poison here, leave this at all goals selected. Come over here and select search. When you do that, and in this case, grade 6, the goals are listed down here. And right off the bat, you can see that under these 6th grade Indiana goals, we have 2 6AF3s. Here it is. That's why when we examined this particular Indiana standard, we found 2 of our QSCs that we aligned to this individual Indiana standard. Same thing happened here, a little ways down. So once you align your standards, don't panic when you see this number out here. One of the reasons you're going to see that number is because, just like we shared, we help you unpack those standards. We help give you a little insight that you can use. You don't have to use, but the insight is there nonetheless. Then as we move over here, you have the quantile measures listed. And again, you can make that leap to think that if QSC, that this state goal was aligned to, has a difficulty of 840 quantile, that your state goal, I keep losing my cursor, also has a difficulty of an 840 quantile. Now, we're going to tell you the strand where we have placed, keep in mind, our QSCs. All of this information has to do with our QSCs. Your standards come into play when we have aligned a standard to one of our QSCs. Now, a few other things I want to point out about the Math Skills Database. If you get in our sandbox of the hub and start playing with our toys, within the hub, there are going to be several things that you will see along the way. And when you start clicking on a QSC or one of your math standards, if you will, it's going to take you right back always to the Math Skills Database. This is the database that fuels everything behind the scenes in the Quantile framework. So you will always end up back in this tool. So don't think that that's a mistake, because sometimes we will get an email and someone will say, hey, I was over here and find your lesson, and then I clicked on something. It took me to another whole tool entirely, another whole tool entirely. I'll say, yes, it's meant to. So please don't let that trip you up. And then also, you're going to see that some of our tools will have a resource center over here. The resource center is where you're going to be able to select resources that we have calibrated and added to our QSCs. So now you're going to have that opportunity to even email activities, interactive games. There's some worksheets. I say that with hesitation. There's math and literature connections there. So you will be able to email these home because they were calibrated at the level of the QSC that we've attached them to. And now that that QSC has been aligned to your standards, you have those access. You have access to those as well. So resources that have been calibrated to the Quantile framework for mathematics, meaning all of these little QSCs here. Have fun. We have worked to study our QSCs and to go out on the web. Some of these have been developed there at Metametrics also, but to go out on the web, find resources that we can calibrate for the difficulty of our individual QSCs. And we have linked to those within our database. And before you panic, if it's not a free resource, we keep digging to find something else. So that you may be asked to set up an account, but it'll be a free account. So just keep in mind, you would have access to having these resources that we have calibrated for the level of the QSC where you will find them. And those QSCs now are aligned to your math standards, and you've got the opportunity to email these home, especially depending on how our school year starts up here in the next few weeks ahead. These resources, I think, you and your educators that you work with will find them very valuable. Here's another tool. It's called, this isn't the Math Skills Database, but this is the Quantile Find Your Lesson. Within the hub, and you get into the Find Your Lesson, you will find we have over 700 textbooks that we've calibrated, meaning we have looked and investigated the individual lessons, identified the difficulty on the quantile scale. Then within the lesson, we have also added that QSC to that lesson. And now, if as an educator going through the lesson, as this happened to me very often, everything will be going just swimmingly. They did fine. They did just fine in lesson 1. Well, it was a 16 quantile measure of difficulty for that lesson when it was calibrated. But then when we got to lesson 2, oh my goodness, look how far that lesson has jumped. So that may be why those little bunkins are hitting the brick wall, if you will. So look, we've got these resources out here that may help. It could be a tutorial video and the like, an interactive game that you might send home, because notice right up here is that resource center again, and you can email that home. And you can show all the QSCs are shown, but this gives you that information when it says show all QSCs of the resources that are back there per lesson. Now the book isn't back there, but again, this is a tool, just like I shared just a minute ago, that when you click on this QSC, don't think you've just gone to another place in the hub. This is going to take you right back to the Math Skills Database. So the pieces again, if you were with me on Wednesday to learn about the Lexile framework for reading, we had all sorts of places that you could go on the internet and find text assigned to Lexile measure. Remember, you also had your own set of resources provided to you by the state of Indiana. The Quantile framework is somewhat different in that you may be using one of our partner products as the assessment piece, but all of the resources and the opportunity to email things home are found here at quantiles.com and the hub that you will find that you can get to right up there in that little orange bar. And then your assessment, the iLearn, one of those benchmark partner products, is where that student will get his or her quantile measure of readiness. So, how does all of this inform differentiation? And we take this kind of slow and easy because we're going to throw some more new terms at you, and we apologize for that, but they're all explained on our website. And again, you'll have this recording if you can stand to listen to this Southern voice again. So how does this inform instruction, or what happens when students aren't ready, or if they're too advanced for that focus skill? So the Quantile framework is the vehicle you can use to reach students where they are, to get them where they need to be, but also those excellent mathematicians that you find within your classrooms. You can meet their needs too and not hold those students back either. Within the Quantile framework, and when you are in the Math Skills Database. When you go to, if you will, that Math Skills Database and align your standards like we did just a minute ago for grade 6, if you open any one of those math standards or the QSC that it was aligned to, you're going to arrive at what we call the Quantile skill and concept page. And on that page, the reason you arrive there is that you've got to teach a particular standard and you're wanting to take a look at that difficulty level of that standard by looking at the QSC aligned to it. That is what we would call the focus skill. Basically, the way I think of it, the focus skill is what brings you into the Quantile framework from your standards. It's that QSC. And when you click on the QSC aligned to that standard, you are going to arrive at a page that has some information about that QSC or that focus skill that brought you there. We're going to give you insight. You already know the quantile measure, that focus skill, because that was why you were here anyway, to see the difficulty of that math standard you're going to teach. And that QSC that was aligned has that level of difficulty. Down below on that page, you will see the prerequisite skills for that QSC. As we did the research, we were able to identify those skills that a child needs to understand before going deeper into whatever the skill and concept is. Well, that's good, Jane, but how do I know this? Because each of those prerequisite skills will also have a measure of difficulty on the quantile scale. So you're able to look at a roster of children, you're getting ready to teach that focus skill, and you realize the focus skill is too difficult. You can look at the prerequisite skills to see where you could do a mini, M-I-N-I. Sometimes teachers panic thinking it's the other one. You can do a mini lesson on one of those prerequisite skills to bring their understanding up to the place where you're ready to teach the focus skill, if you will. So those prerequisites are what a child needs to understand. Do you need to teach all the prerequisites? No, because you're looking at that quantile measure of difficulty on those prerequisites to see which students may need an intro lesson, or if students are placed and there's a teacher that tutors them on a couple of times a week, maybe you want to email some activities down the hall to that teacher, or down the block, if you will, in this day of COVID. So those prerequisites are there. As a menu, a buffet, if you will. We aren't saying all of those need to be taught, because that quantile measure is going to tell you what they're ready for. Are they ready to go right on with instruction on that focus skill? You can determine that from the quantile measure. Those that aren't, prerequisites are recommended. So the 4 parts of the knowledge cluster will be that focus skill. The prerequisites to tell you a direction to take for those students not quite ready for the focus skill. Supporting skills may or may not be there. Supporting skills, they're related. That's how you can take that more advanced student a little bit broader, a little bit deeper into the concept you're teaching. All of our QSCs have prerequisite skills. All of our QSCs have impending skills. What comes next? Supporting skills, sometimes there may not be an indication there. But just like the title explains, impending skills are those skills that within the quantile framework might come next. Now, do you just drop your math curriculum by the road and pick up, oh, well, they say that's what comes next, I'll start teaching that? Heavens, no. Your math curriculum is your guiding piece of instruction. You know that. But what also we're doing as a guide on the side, we are giving you some information to weigh and add to what you know about your standards, what you know about your students, what you know about already would have been done as an intro lesson for these children. We are giving you a buffet of opportunities, resources that an educator selects from. So let's take a look. A Quantile skill and concept detail page looks like this. In the Math Skills database, when you decided that as that 5th grade teacher, I'm going to teach this Indiana skill. This is my focus skill. I aligned my curriculum. I found that this focus skill was aligned to QSC 154. QSC 154 has a difficulty level of a 620 quantile. So we know this Indiana skill does too. Now, if I'm looking at a roster of children and I have a couple of children that are falling maybe in the 400 quantile measure level, if you will. They're not ready. They can't make a jump of 220 quantiles. That's going to leave a gap in their understanding, and that introductory lesson, they're not going to get much from it at all. But what I might do is then when I find this focus skill in the Quantile database and I open the QSC, I look at the prerequisites, and instead of throwing those little babies that on my roster had a 400 quantile measure, maybe before I go here, let's maybe do a mini lesson here first. Kind of get them, just kind of put their toes in the water for this focus skill first, if you will. So that is how a knowledge cluster is actually set up. Those prerequisite skills are skills that we want those students to have a firm understanding of, and the way we determine that is by the quantile measure. And if you've got a roster filled with children somewhere between, we'll say, 600 quantile up to a 700 quantile, or maybe even a 550 quantile. It's really about a 100-point spread, but if you're right there holding their hands and doing the instruction, you can stretch that spread, if you will. If your children on your roster are already ready for that focus skill to be taught, go for it. You don't need the information that the knowledge cluster shares. This is for when those students aren't quite ready. So, and a metaphor we use to give you a little more insight into this, if you will, is that of a tree. And I'm certain Matt's going to be sharing this link with you in the chat field. He usually either jumps ahead of me or he's out there grabbing it to put it in that chat. There it went, I bet. So a knowledge cluster can be thought of like a tree. We want a strong trunk because that trunk's got to support what's coming next. But in order to have a strong trunk, we literally have to make certain that root system has everything it needs so that this trunk is strong enough to go to that next level, if you will. So the tree is kind of a good way to think about how that knowledge cluster works. So how do we use that knowledge cluster? What are the applications, if you will? Those knowledge clusters do inform instruction so that you can meet those children where they are to get them where they need to be. As you've already seen, we help you unpack those standards. So we give you some insight. We are not the end-all, be-all, if you will. But we give you insight into your standards. We're that guide on the side. We're not the throw everything else away and live and breathe the Quantile framework. It is there as one of the tools in your toolkit. You can take students deeper. Those supporting skills in those knowledge clusters is a really nice place to continue to grow those students that are very proficient in math already so that they can continue their growth as well. The last two bullets are really, really important. And we've gotten an awful lot of information from the field, if you will, about using the Quantile framework for mathematics and that math skills database. You can adjust your IEPs according to the Quantile measures. That can be your growth target, if you will. You can start thinking about, here's what we're going to do because we want to see that next benchmark grow to this point. And then, though, think about those RTI sessions that you have with your parents, and they come in and you've got that RTI team, if you will, in the school building or there in the district, however you operate these. And the teacher is talking to that parent about the progress being seen and what areas in math does the child still need to work on. Well, there could be another teacher on this team sitting with a laptop open within the math skills database. And as that teacher hears the classroom teacher talk about the deficiencies, and at home we'd like to send you an interactive game that you can play on the computer with your student or whatever to help build those skills, there's a teacher over here creating a resource list from our website that address the deficiencies that are being discussed in that RTI meeting. And at the end of the meeting, that teacher can say, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so or grandma, whoever it is, we're going to be emailing home to you a list of resources that while we're working here in the school to improve the math of your loved one here, here are some things you can be doing at home. So it truly is a resource that can not only help inform instruction, but it can help you communicate some resources that will continue that same hard work going on in the classroom that can take place when homework's finished. And we have so many interactive games that truly students use those. They really don't realize sometimes that it's improving their math. So just think about ways that you can use our math skills database when you get into the hub to play. So again, we're putting that difficulty of the skill, we're putting the student's readiness, ability, the resources are there, your math standards are there on the very same scale. So now, if Sam's in your classroom or Sam is on your roster in the weeks ahead, and Sam's got a 550 quantile and you're wanting to send some things home that'll help Sam get up to being ready for this focus skill, compare and order fractions, that quantile framework and that resource center can help you do that until a time when you're back in that classroom again with Sam, whatever day. I know here in North Carolina, we're doing kind of that blended thing and giving parents that option to work at home with the teacher's guidance. So, so let's just quickly think about what we have learned up to this point and how you can use the Quantile framework to meet the needs of all learners. We're going to have in our minds a hypothetical group of children, and one of the children happen to be called Laura, and it's easier for me, instead of saying small group, I'll just say Laura's group or what have you. But we're going to look at how that math skills database could be used by a classroom teacher along with those knowledge clusters to meet the needs, and kind of on the way of meeting, prepping to meet the needs of the children, getting some insight into his or her curriculum. So here we've got Indiana Standard, 5th grade again. I told you I taught 5th grade. 5th grade standard, DS2. And the verbiage for that 5th grade standard, understand and use measures of center, mean, and median and frequency mode to describe a data set. So probably a pretty major standard there in that 5th grade classroom. And when we go to the website or the math skills database and we find Indiana grade 5, and we find those grade 5 standards, when we open up this standard that we're going to teach, our focus standard, remember, and when we click on it, we find that we at Metametrics have unpacked that 5DS2 for you 1, 2, 3, 4 times. However, I'm intending to teach described data using the mean. This is where I'm going to go. This is where I am in my instruction. I probably started here, described data using the mode, because that's the easy one. And I've worked my way up to describe data using the mean. I used to tell my children it's going to require you to do some division, and that's why we call it mean. They seem to like that because they agreed. So as I go forward, here I am finding mean for this Indiana standard. Had a difficulty, as we saw, of an 850 quantile. We've layered on top of this Laura and those students that are in that math group with Laura. Their approximate quantile measure collectively is somewhere around a 450 quantile. Those kids can't jump that far. But now we can look at the ability of this small math group on the quantile scale with the concept that I have to teach. And now I'm looking at it quantitatively. I know exactly how far these two endpoints are, if you will. So it gives us that opportunity to realize, nah, I can't go ahead and push it. I can't push that off on these children yet. So what am I going to do? Well, just to get that visual again, here's that group. Here's that standard. They can't go there. But the quantile framework, remember the knowledge cluster, can help us make those trunks strong. So Laura's group, keep that in the back of your mind, is a 450 quantile measure, kind of in the average there. There we go. We're finding the mean, aren't we? QSC 214, described data using the mean, has an 850 quantile measure. Now, we know they're not ready, but we looked at the prerequisites and we found out they're not ready for this either. The prereqs are too high. So we're thinking, well, let me come down here and see these resources. When you're in the hub, because I know you're going to be there, you may already be there now. When you're in the hub and you've created your account, please know that when you open the knowledge cluster page or that quantile skill and concept page, please know, yes, you see resources down here. There's 6. These were selected because they are at or around a difficulty level of 850 quantile. You can't use these resources for Laura and her friends in that group. So keep that in mind. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to select as the teacher. Again, it's like a menu. Select where you want the drill down to occur. And in this instance, we're going to drill down to QSC 171. Here we are. QSC 171, estimating solid division problem. We knew it was at a 690. It's still too darn difficult. Jane, look, there's 15 resources down there. Remember what I shared. These resources have been calibrated or were found because they come in after they were examined at somewhere around a 690 quantile measure of difficulty. You can't use these with Laura in the group. You got to walk on by. Look at these prerequisites. Divide using single-digit divisors with and without remainders. Come in at a 450 quant. That's where they're ready. That group is somewhere around a 450 quantile. So if I click on QSC 166, 450 is the difficulty level of QSC 166. That's where they're right ready. And again, we do like our perfect examples. I'll give you that. But a 450 quantile measure, I've got 13 resources that I can pick and choose from to actually work with Laura and that small group to get them ready for that focus skill. And here they are. Now, you saw that resource center. I said that's how you would email things home. Before you join me in the hub next Thursday. I hope you will all come, but by next Thursday, you may all be hub experts, but come on anyway and share what you've learned. Here are these 13 resources, and once you open those 13 resources, you have check marks. You will just take this check mark, this plus sign, and click on it, make it a check mark, and that will put it into, let's see, I've got it up here, into the resource center. It got cut off in that screenshot. So when you open these resources, take that plus sign, pick and choose those resources that you're thrilled with, and that actually adds them to the resource center. And then you select those again, and you can create a list. And once you have created the list, you will get a link that will enable you to email those resources you selected home. So again, connected to your standards there in Indiana, you've got that difficulty measure from those QSCs, and those QSCs have resources that have been calibrated for that difficulty level. So here's what just happened. We looked at our standard in Indiana, and we decided we needed to describe data using the mean. We looked at the first level of prerequisites, and they were too difficult, but we decided which way to click down. And we found that on that next level down, a prerequisite that was exactly where Laura and her friends were ready for instruction, for an introductory lesson, if you will. Divide using single-digit divisors with and without remainders. Huh. Wow. Now, if I think about this, finding the mean involves division. So if they are ready for dividing, that little group is ready for dividing using single-digit divisors with and without remainders, eureka. I can go ahead and teach that focus lesson to the whole class. I need to make certain, as I am talking to the class about finding the mean, I don't put more than 9 pieces of data in any example that I use. That's where they're ready. They're ready to understand divide using single-digit divisors with and without remainders. That's where I can start my instruction. Now, I can, for those other students that are ready at that 850 quantile, when I do some guided practice, I can put some guided practice in their hands that have double-digit divisors. And then I can pull Laura and the group over to do a little mini lesson there to get them ready to tackle this for any set of data that may come their way. So the insight does exist. Now, that is basically that quantile framework for mathematics that I did share. We are a research company, and our founders, Dr. Malbert Smith and Dr. Jack Stenner, they've been pondering and researching college and career readiness before it was cool. And over the years, they have done some research, but they then ultimately brought that research kind of to a bigger audience, if you will, and had even more research done. And looking at the quantile framework for math, you will realize in the hub that there's something called the growth planner. And the growth planner is fueled, if you will, by our career database. And what we've actually done in our research is we've looked at collections of text, clusters of resources, if you will, and we can tell you exactly what pathway we need students to be on for them to graduate college and career ready. Now, on the Lexile side, you saw this on Wednesday. We know that if students can graduate in a perfect world reading somewhere around a 1300 L, they are going to be ready for anything that they may face. We know that if they graduate able to handle math somewhere around a 1350 quantile, they're going to be ready for any math. If they're going on to, maybe they're going to join their father in a career, their mother in their career. They are going to a 2-year school, a 4-year school, going into the military. We've examined those career clusters of text. We've taken it down to the nth degree too. We can say to a student that, so you're wanting to grow up and follow in your mom or dad's footsteps and become an electrician. We know from the research Metametrics has done, that you need to be reading somewhere around a 1270 L. We wouldn't use this as a gotcha, but it starts a conversation. And we know you need to be able to handle math somewhere to 1045 quantile. So you think about when we can talk to students in this manner, we have the opportunity to connect what they're doing day to day, week to week, to what they want to graduate high school and go on and become either a career or their next endeavor. So you would go to our Quantile website. I'm just showing this. This is another way that you may get to the hub by going to quantiles.com. And you can get to the Lexile and Quantile hub right here. When you get into the hub, you will see that the growth planner is right there in the hub. And when you click on the growth planner, you will see where it says add and edit a measure. The measures that the growth planner has been calibrated to this point to use appropriately and successfully would be those iLearn summative assessment quantile measures. Same thing with the Lexile side of things. So you would select add, edit a measure. When you do this, this box will open up, and into this box you would put the quantile student measures and the test month and so forth, and the grade and so forth. And we see that we're using the 3 data points, grade 5, 6, and 7. Another thing to note behind the scenes here, you will know that you have arrived at the hub and your registration was complete after you click on that link in that email that you get. When you see your Indiana icon, when you get into the hub, you know that you are getting all the bells and whistles that we have to throw at you when you see that special Indiana hub logo that is there for you. That's how you'll know you've arrived, so to speak. Now, when you're playing with the growth planner, because you didn't get your, you can go back to a few years before when you are looking at those quantile measures if you'd like to, and you make certain you put a check mark in these boxes. I lose my cursor in these boxes. And then you select submit. What will come up is a graph. Now, this graph is based on our research, and let me point out just a few things to you. You can see it there, but within the Quantile framework, our research into where students need to fall throughout their time with us in education is represented by this blue swath. This blue swath is going to be the same if I go in and put in my quantile measures, or a 3rd grade teacher puts in that first 3rd grade quantile measure at the end of the year. This swath is the same. This is what we've identified as the pathway for mathematical readiness. Now remember, we put in a 5th grade, a 6th grade, and a 7th grade quantile measure. Look at what we're finding when that child is in 7th, going into 8th grade, if you will, in middle school, that if their estimated growth path continues as it's seen here, they're not going to graduate college and career ready, capable to face whatever the world throws at them in their next phase of life. So at that child in middle school, we can start having that conversation. You want to grow up and you would like to become an architect. Then let's take a look. To become an architect, you're going to be required to do this level math, and you need to be reading, because we have also a Lexile growth planner, and you're going to need to be reading at disability. You can get there. We can certainly go forward, make certain we're going to work on that math together. We'll work on those reading skills together. We're going to get you there. But we're able to start having that exact conversation with that student in middle school, instead of waiting to, oh my gosh, oh, so you didn't do very well when you left us. It's not a we got you kind of a situation. It's oh, by the way. But we can take it even a step further. Up here, you see in this graph, add and edit careers. When you do this, and in this instance, the student said, I want to go into information technology and become a graphic designer. So when you add and edit the career, when this box comes up, you will see graphic designer here, and here's the zone of where that quantile math level is going to fall. You click on that purple rectangle, if you will, and we take you behind the scenes. We can talk to that student now that the math measures you're going to face are going to be somewhere between 1120 quantile to a 1360 quantile. So we want to get you right there close when you leave us, so nothing will trip you up, if you will. Then we're going to tell the child the number of years in school, the essential education, if you will, how that career compares nationally, the projected growth in the career, the projected openings. But then a student working alongside that guidance counselor, that CT person, or whoever is the counselor there in middle school can say, hey, we can come down here and let's add the burning glass information by selecting the state you live in, selecting the metropolitan statistical area. In this case, it's the Indianapolis, that area. And when you click search, now we can talk about becoming a graphic designer right here where you live. Here's what that median pay is going to be. Here's how long it takes to fill a position. Here was the last census that they did about the number of openings here in the area exactly where you live. So you have an awful lot of information to be sharing with students earlier rather than later, so that we can instill in them the need to, let's pick up the pace here, not a get you, but a conversation starter. So as we, I see we are about arriving at about 5 minutes left to our time together today. Just a couple of key takeaways, if I can drag your attention away from the hub. I'm sure you're all already in the hub playing, but you're listening, and that's fine too. So keep in mind that that quantile framework can help you when you identify that focus skill, get you into the knowledge cluster, and you realize you've got students on target ready for whatever level that lesson is that you've got to teach. But remember, it may be those prerequisites that help you with the students that aren't quite ready. That the lesson you're going to teach was a 680 you determined, and you found that you have a young lady in the classroom at a 500 quantile. Not ready, but you found a prerequisite that gets her close to that day's lesson. And then you've got a child in your classroom that's above target with a quantile measure of a 950Q. We can look at those supporting skills and take her deeper, not totally away from that focus lesson, but take her deeper and continue to grow this student where she is already capable. So think about the quantile framework for mathematics. You can gauge that degree of challenge within your standards. You also can look at that student's readiness ability. You've got the resources, the tools, your math standards are there. You can monitor their growth. You can now communicate that growth with parents. You can talk to teachers where students head to in the next year to say, this child at the end of my school year was here on the quantile scale. Here's where you need to pick up and keep on keeping on. But as you can see, the quantile framework was built around the concept of where a child is ready. And if we are meeting them where they are ready to learn, to get them where they need to be, we are making math instruction equitable. So just a few key takeaways, if you will. Now, I think Matt sent me a message that said his internet was unstable, so I'm hoping he's still back there, because I'm going to flip it over to him in just a minute. Again, you will have this PowerPoint. You will have this recording as soon as we can get all this together. But on the screen, you're going to see that next Thursday, I keep advertising it. You would think that I work for the company or something. But we will do a tour of the Quantile Hub next Thursday at 9 o'clock to 10:30, as you see there. The flyer. I believe Matt probably has already shared that with you, that has the session link, that Zoom link that you will hop on, and it'll be Matt in the background and me doing the chatter up front. So hopefully that won't keep you away, my chatter and my Southern accent. But we also want to share a little bit of information about the other sessions that we're going to be providing during those early days in August. We're going to have a couple of, and these are repeat sessions, so you don't have to attend all three, just so that we know those days are going to be crazy, and we wanted to make this available. Hopefully catch one at a time that works into your crazy schedule. But in tandem with the Department of Education there in Indiana and the assessment department, in the absence of those I-Learn summative measures for school year 1920, we just looked at that college and career growth trajectory. Because of the research we've done, we are working together to calculate where those children are going to be had they maybe have taken that I-Learn. We're going to give you that range, if you will, of where they would have been at the end of this school year. So you've got at least that place on the wall with these children to begin instruction. We call that, we are going to work to project those Lexile and Quantile measures. And we're going to have a couple of sessions here to explain how these forecasted projected measures can be used to inform next steps in those years ahead. So please, hopefully one of those will work for you to join us. And right on cue, I've arrived at the end. If you have any questions, here at 11 o'clock in an hour, Matt and I will be in this Zoom link doing office hours. And then again on Monday, and we do this every Monday and Friday. Join us. Please join us. If you have a question between now and next Thursday, or now and those sessions that we're going to do on the projected measures, our email address is down there. Reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We are pretty much at our computers 24/7, if you will, for the most part. So reach out. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your questions. Thanks to each and every one of you for joining us. Matt, if there are questions back there, let me know. And Kelly, if you have anything you'd like to share, jump in. But to each and every one of you, thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you, air quotes, on Thursday. Matt, Kelly.
Thank you, Jane, so much for that. Probably most important, folks, before you leave, as Kelly requested at the beginning, if you didn't catch it, in the chat box, please chat us your email address so that we can record your attendance here today. And when you do that, please choose the Everyone in Meeting option so that it's recorded in the chat log. If you chat it to one of us privately, it won't be captured. So again, to document your attendance here today, please chat us your email address so that we can take that for you. And again, we hope you've appreciated this information and this quick introduction to some of what you can do with quantile measures. As Jane said, we will be available in our office hours here in about an hour. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of time to poke around in the hub, play with some of those tools. And then if you do have a question, come join us. You don't have to stay for the whole hour. Jump in, get your questions answered, and then you can jump right back out. Kelly, I'll throw it to you for just a second. Any final words?
Thanks so much, Matt and Jane, for taking the time to present this information to Indiana educators, and thanks to the educators for taking time to be part of it. I hope it was valuable. I hope you took away something that you can actually put into play, to put into practice over the next few weeks and months. And don't be shy. Be sure to reach out with questions to both Jane and Matt as you have them, or to us at the department if we can be of assistance. And we hope that you'll join us for another session next week. So check out the flyer. I put the link in the chat. And then when you before you take off this morning, be sure you add your email address into the chat so we can capture that. And our team, my team at the department, will work to compile all of that information, and it will issue PGP certificates at the conclusion of the series. So I think that's all I've got. I really wish you well and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. We'll stay on the line here just to capture any of those last-minute email addresses or any questions that you have. Happy Friday. Have a fabulous weekend. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.